Welcome to the Farming Podcast, brought to you by Private Property. My name is Mbali Nwoko, and today we're going to be talking about factors to consider when renting or buying a farm. And the reason why this topic is so important is because a number of farmers find themselves in a difficult position when they either have to expand the operation or include certain commodities onto their farming operations. So I just want to give you a rundown of a quick checklist of factors to consider before deciding on whether or not you're going to buy this farm or rent this farm. I'll start off with land size, to be specific. The reason why I'm talking about land size is because based on what you want to do on this farm, it's important to know how much land size that you need to work with. For example, I know with cattle, there's specific hectares per cattle that's required for the animals to graze in. And with horticultural crops and fruits as well and vegetables, there's also specific land size in terms of what the type of commodity that you're going to be farming that's needed onto that land. So prior to signing on to that lease or purchasing agreement, think about the land size. And if you're going to start in terms of your cattle production, think of, is this farm big enough for me not only to graze my cattle on, but maybe in future consider farming other commodities such as maize to add into your livestock feed in the next couple of years, should you want to integrate into that value chain of your operations. For horticultural crops, I know farming vegetables such as your cabbages, your onions, your potatoes, your carrots. Typically, those crops need large tracts of lands for you to get a good return on investment into your farming operations. Similarly, that goes with fruit trees like avocados, etc. So think about the land size that you're going to be purchasing. Is this ideal for your farming operations and the strategy that you want to take in the near future? Secondly, I would definitely look at doing soil and water tests. The reason for that is because when you're going to plant vegetables, for example, you need to know what type of soil you're working with, if there's any soil-borne diseases, and what were the previous farm owners or land owners cultivating on that farm, so that you know how to rotate your crops accordingly, or what other nutrients you need to put into the soil prior to you cultivating on that land. So if you do a water test and a soil test, these are the indicators to inform you in terms of what type of soil and water you're working with. And water, most importantly, is imperative in your agricultural production, especially crop production, because plants need good water for them to grow. And similarly with your livestock, for example, poultry, chickens need water every minute of every hour, I suppose. But it's important to know that you're feeding your cattle or your livestock good water that is clean and safe for them to drink. So I think, just to sum off on that point, doing a soil and water test is very important. The third one I'd like you to consider is looking at the surroundings. What infrastructure is there on the farm? Is there a borehole? Is there electricity connection? Is there adequate fencing, gate, security systems? Because farming is quite intensive and you're investing a lot once you start farming into this business. And therefore you want to ensure that your asset is safely secured. And so you have to have good, reliable electrical connection, especially if you're doing a horticultural crops. Secondly, you have to have good security. A number of farmers complain about the amount of stock theft that happens on their farm, especially when it comes to their sheep or livestock. So it's important to have good security measures implemented onto your farm. And so these are the things to consider prior to you purchasing or signing on that lease agreement. The next point is to look at the infrastructure also that is nearby to the farm. And I'm specifically relating to the roads. How far is your farm to your nearby markets? If the farm is quite secluded in a very rural area and your market is in the urban areas, you need to take that into consideration in terms of the amount of logistics you're going to spend once you take your crop to market. So do that planning. But if your farm is quite closer to market, like peri-urban areas, you definitely have an advantage there, because maybe you can negotiate with your clients to rather them come to fetch crops or produce onto your farm instead of you outsourcing your logistics. And so road is a very important aspect there, because again, once you also start producing from vegetables or any horticultural commodity, it's important to know how long your crop is going to take from a transportation point of view to market. And the reason why this is important is because vegetable and farming vegetables and fruits have a very short post-harvest lifespan. They're very perishable products. So you need to know that if I'm going to take my vegetables to a client and I have to drive maybe 2 hours or get that product will probably take 2 hours to get to the client, you need to factor in a good refrigeration truck so that by the time your product gets to the client, it's safe to consume, not only for their consumers, but it's safe for your client to purchase from you. So definitely consider how far in terms of distance your farm will be to your market. The other factor that I definitely look at is also, where is your farm located in relation to the nearby community? I particularly like this factor a lot. A number of farmers have different interests. I mean, some people would like to farm in a very secluded area because their perspective is that if I'm not closer to a community, then maybe my farm would be safe. But preferably, I would like to farm close to a nearby community because you have great potential in creating employment and really building a good society or community around your farm. And so if your farm is going to be very far from a nearby community, you have to take into consideration the fact that you might need workers at some point in time, and therefore, are you going to maybe have a company shuttle that will fetch your workers to and from the farm, or are you going to be closer to a community where your employees can walk to and from the farm? And then again, you need to also think of, should you want employees to be accommodated onto the farm, or you definitely just outsource and they would come on a daily basis. And so these are some of the checklists and points that I definitely recommend for you to consider prior to you purchasing that farm or renting the farm. And once again, I'll just run them by with you. It's definitely to think of the land size, especially in terms of the objective that you have for your farm business. Secondly, looking at the water and soil analysis of that farm. Thirdly, is looking at the infrastructure, things like security, fencing, gates, especially for your livestock. The community is very important. Is your farm far to and from a community? And you think of, how am I going to employ people in the next coming years, or once your farm is in production? And then the last point is looking at the logistics aspects of your farm. Is your farm closer to major roads and infrastructure where your clients can get to and from your farm with less ease, more ease, sorry to say that, with more ease. So I know one other aspect to definitely consider is you may be watching and thinking, okay, I'm not buying or renting a farm, but I've inherited a farm. And so what I'd say to you is that if you've inherited a farm and that farm was already in production, then keep it that way. Continue as business as usual, learning from what's already been happening on that farm. However, if you have inherited a farm and it's not in production and you really want to start production onto that farm, I would definitely say, think of those factors that I've just discussed above and just really work with what you have. If nothing has been cultivated on that farm, definitely still do your soil and water analysis. If a borehole is existing on that farm as well, definitely test that borehole, see how much yield in terms of water that borehole can produce per hour, because you can make then an informed decision on what to plant onto that land if you're thinking of horticultural crops. And then again, the infrastructure, the fencing, the security, all of these things you need to take into consideration on, and definitely make sure that do as much research as you can and think through every single step in your business. I suppose drafting a small business plan for yourself, especially if you've inherited land if you've inherited land and you want to start cultivating on that farm. So think of these things which are very crucial in terms of your farming operations. And in future, these steps could either make or break your farm, especially if you want to expand or diversify into additional crop or commodity onto that land. So thank you so much for joining. the farming podcast brought to you by Private Property, and I look forward to you guys once again for the next episode, which will be aired on Thursday at 1 o'clock with me, Mbali Nwoko. Take care.